It's a very strange priority to have, isn't it? It's an odd thing to think, yeah, the way we solve this is by mutilating the genitals of children from other states.
This is such a self-involved little narcissist. He even decides to turn the memory of 9/11 into a story about his aunt and the subway. Do we allow things like the slaughter of 3,000 Americans to be turned instead a story of how this fictitious figure of his aunt might have once felt possibly as if someone could look at her badly, nastily in the subway in the years after? Americans can't even be murdered by jihadists without people like Mamdani turning it into a fear of a pseudo-fictitious aunt of theirs once feeling sad about possibly being looked at meanly. I mean, this is just outrageous.
You're about to witness one of the most brutal takedowns Douglas Murray has ever delivered. From shocking political stunts to jaw-dropping moments of logic, he doesn't hold back. And some of the things he exposes, absolutely wild. If you're ready for it, smash that like button and drop a comment telling us where you are watching from.
It's a very strange priority to have, isn't it, for a city in which an innocent citizen can be, for instance, set on light and burned to death on the subway. It's a weird priority in a city which has a homelessness crisis and so many challenges. It's an odd thing to think, yeah, the way we solve this is by mutilating the genitals of children from other states. There's a very strange radical left platform that always prioritizes the same thing. You can completely predict their policies. Of course, they'll say this about trans. Of course, they'll not be able to condemn a phrase like globalize the intifada. I mean, just think about that for a moment. There have been these struggle sessions where Mamdani has tried to explain why globalize the intifada is not a bad phrase, means something other than it means. The words don't mean what the words mean.
In 2023, New York City saw record high subway assaults in over 3 decades. Yet the headlines were dominated by debates about gender policies in schools. That's the kind of disconnect Douglas is calling out. And it doesn't stop at policy. It bleeds straight into the language they normalise.
But just consider for a moment, intifada is a violent struggle in which, among other things, American students were blown up at the cafeteria of an Israeli university whilst they were buying and enjoying a morning coffee. The intifada meant a suicide bomber walking in and detonating. You think globalizing that's a good idea? You think you should be hot for gender transition and also hot for suicide bombing in New York cafes? Really? Those are your priorities? Those are your principles? We've seen the normalization of rhetoric and ideas that used to be just way out.
Within 5 years alone, about 515 civilians were killed and over 3,400 were injured in more than 150 bomb attacks in Israel. So while some people are hyped about edgy slogans, real danger was happening and barely getting attention, and things only get wilder when Douglas dives into what's actually happening in New York politics next.
You say communism is not spreading, but there may be socialism spreading in New York City. The next mayor of New York is Zohran Mamdani. What does that say about the city that you live in, the largest city in the country, the state of the Democratic Party?
It's heartbreaking. I love New York. It's one of the great cities of the world. I moved there 5 years ago, and I don't know, maybe I'll move to California.
Got plenty of room here. Gavin Newsom welcomes you with open arms.
I'm not sure. He might not count me a win.
Yeah.
Gotta love Douglas's quick jab at the guy asking about NYC politics, then tossing the Gavin Newsom joke like it's no big deal. Sharp, funny, and still hitting hard. Next, he dives into the history most people totally miss, and it's about to get eye-opening.
There are many unlearned lessons from history, and there are many unlearned lessons from the 20th century. We've learned most of the lessons of what happens when you see fascism coming. The left, by comparison, has never had such a reckoning moment. Whereas we know how you get to Auschwitz, how do you get to the Gulag? I mean, you get there somehow, but the left, and I think the broader culture, has never worked out what the gradations of this are, so that you go socialism, communitarianism, collectivism. All of these are still totally acceptable parts of the political spectrum. But like somewhere you get to the horrors of communism. How? Where? Where's the point?
Yeah.
And that's where somebody like Mayor of New York, that's where they play around. They play around in this incredibly dark, unclear territory which their political side has still not properly litigated.
Douglas really lays out how the left hasn't fully faced the lessons of history, showing how ignoring these patterns can get messy. And speaking of messy, next he dives into the New York City exodus, people fleeing the city after Mamdani's election, looking for safer streets and cheaper living, but still bringing their politics with them. And it's really fascinating.
You know, in the US, the federal system, one of the great geniuses of it is that it makes it very easy to move around different states looking for work, looking for cheaper housing, looking for better standard or quality of living, looking for places with less crime and so on. When there have been exoduses of people from progressive states like California in the past, you see a phenomenon that occurs in other countries too, but it's very stark in America, where people end up leaving a place where the policies they have effectively voted for most of their lives come into effect, make their lives worse. And then some people who can flee to a place that has more conservative politics, but they bring their liberal politics with them. You can see that, and you can see that in Texas. Many people from California fled California. They go to places like Austin, Texas, and they keep voting Democrat.
Look at this. Between 2020 and 2022, New York City lost nearly 500,000 residents as people packed up and left the city. Can you even imagine what's about to happen now with Mamdani coming in? Douglas is setting up the big picture here, a city already bleeding people, facing rising chaos and about to see political decisions that could make the exodus even worse.
Mamdani went to an elite college, didn't get into Columbia where his father teaches post-colonial studies, that most useful of professions. Tried to make it as a rapper, failed at that. So obviously he should be mayor of New York. I think that most people thought that somebody who had so little experience and who also had such a track record of just radical left couldn't possibly make it to the final round, let alone to get the nomination.
And here's where Douglas really throws shade. Mamdani turns 9/11 into a story about his aunt on the subway, and Douglas isn't having it. You can practically see him shaking his head at the self-importance, but that's just the tip of the iceberg. What he digs into next is going to leave jaws on the floor.
I want to speak to the memory of my aunt, who stopped taking the subway after September 11th because she did not feel safe in her hijab.
This is such a self-involved little narcissist with so little going for him that he even decides to turn the memory of 9/11 and the 3,000 Americans murdered that day into a story about his aunt and the subway. Do we allow things like the slaughter of 3,000 Americans by Islamic fundamentalists to be turned instead a story of how this fictitious figure of his aunt might have once felt possibly as if someone could look at her badly, nastily in the subway in the years after? This is just outrageous. He's not able to focus on the things that actually have affected America, and instead wants to keep on creating, as so many radicals like him do, wants to create fictitious narratives about America and Americans being bigoted. And, you know, Americans can't even be murdered by jihadists without people like Mamdani turning it into a fear of a pseudo-fictitious aunt of theirs once feeling sad about possibly being looked at meanly. I mean, this is just outrageous.
Douglas doesn't hold back, pointing out how Mamdani keeps twisting real dangers into these made-up personal dramas. It's like nothing that actually affects everyday Americans matters. Just a constant stream of fear for a figure that barely exists. And right when you think it can't get any more absurd, Douglas shifts to the bigger picture. How some politicians import foreign conflicts and grudges straight into local politics.
He's of a Muslim background, and he seems to be just reiterating certain Muslim political talking points. It's to attack a Hindu leader, a leader of the one Jewish state. This is just something we have seen a lot in Europe in recent years, and it's very striking seeing this kind of Islamic politics come to New York, because we have not yet heard Mamdani say that if a representative of the revolutionary government of Iran sets foot in New York, that they will be arrested. Why? Why is it only the prime ministers of India
and Israel, who must be arrested in New York. The president of Turkey is currently occupying the north of Cyprus, which is an EU member state. He's been repressing and attacking the stateless Kurdish people for decades. I'm afraid this is Islamist politicking on the international stage being brought to the domestic stage in New York.
And there you have it. Douglas Murray dismantling the nonsense, calling out selective outrage and showing just how disconnected some political narratives are from reality. From radical priorities to twisted personal stories and imported conflicts, he leaves no stone unturned. The big takeaway? Stay sharp, question the hype, and remember to separate real problems from the drama. If you loved watching Douglas expose it all, there's a ton more where that came from. Check out the full clips and see him keep the heat on woke culture.